The reason this book came about was that I had an experience, which I've written about in the book, of about 5 years ago, having what you would almost call a panic attack at a party and just fleeing the party, you know, freezing up, just feeling completely out of control with anxiety and just literally going out the door, getting in my car and driving home. And I got home and I thought, what on earth was that about? Why at the age of, 45 or whatever I was then, am I still grappling with these ridiculous, what feel like irrational, overwhelming feelings in social situations? Especially, why am I still dealing them when in my professional life, as you say, I appear to be perfectly calm and competent?
And even in the mirror at the party, you might catch a glimpse of yourself and you look like that composed, calm, professional Sian, as you call her.
Because I've spent decades perfecting the mask, as you call it.
Scary putting yourself out there in this way. Because it is a confessional memoir. It's intensely personal, but I think people will get a lot out of it because this experience of shyness is something, people just don't talk about.
Yeah. Look, to be honest, I didn't start out planning for it to be so personal. I originally was thinking I'll do, an informative, journalistic kind of a book, that everyone will learn lots about, As a former broadcaster, I'm used to broadcasting so that people learn things. And the more I wrote and the more I got feedback from those who were reading bits, they just kept saying, you know what, it's the personal stuff that really cuts through. The book turned out to be a book about social anxiety and in particular about my own personal experience of social anxiety, which is what psychologists call shyness. And of course what I learned is that one of the main treatments for social anxiety is exposure therapy, where you, in little bits and pieces, expose yourself to the thing that you fear most, which in the case of social anxiety is fear of negative evaluation by other people.
So is that what you fear most?
I think it is. I think that when I discovered that, lots of jigsaw pieces fell into place for me about why I had behaved in the ways that I had, why I had found it incredibly difficult, for example, to approach people, as friends or as, potential lovers. It was quite empowering to learn that. Not that I think that it's kind of cured me, but just for things to make sense and for certain, for example, physiological responses that my body has when in company suddenly made sense.
It is an intriguing paradox, isn't it, that some of the most talented public performers are often, it seems to me, very shy in their private lives. And that can come across as an aloofness, can't it? What do you think is going on? What's at the heart of that paradox, do you think?
Well, what I've learned in writing this book is that there's an essential difference between what we call introverts and shy people. Introverts are people who don't really feel the need to push themselves out into the social world. They're really just quite happy with their own company a lot of the time. Shy people are the people for whom this inability to connect or this difficulty in connecting is deeply distressing because we do want to connect. We do want to be out in the world, going to the parties. With me, I was the most opinionated person I knew and I wanted to make a mark on the world. I wanted to have my say. And the fantastic thing for me was that I discovered, probably almost accidentally, that when I put myself in a professional role, I could be someone else.
Yeah.
I could be someone much less anxious, many fewer what if. Some men, they were still there, but I could hide behind this protective persona of whatever the professional role I was doing at the time. And most of the professional roles I've had have been for institutions or causes which I deeply identified with and felt very passionately about. And that gave me this even extra protection of, my cause is just, I don't care if people negatively evaluate me when I'm being an environmental campaigner because, for goodness sakes, everybody knows we've got to save the planet.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago you wrote a column about Julia Gillard and in fact, you expressed a great intolerance of her public expression, an explanation of being a shy child, just like you were. And you copped some big flack for that, didn't you? And I think that came as quite a shock.
Yes. Well, so people might recall Julia Gillard gave a speech to the press club where she admitted to having been a shy child, and she got quite emotional as she did that. And I heard about that and I felt stricken for her because I knew exactly what that felt like. But I also thought, political mistake, don't admit this weakness.
Don't lift the mask.
Don't lift the mask, particularly if you are a politician trying to put yourself out there as a strong, authoritative person. So I wrote this column. You know, I have a politics degree. I knew all about shyness. I thought I'm just the person for the job. I wrote this column where I explained very carefully and clinically all the reasons why I thought it had been a political mistake for Julia Gillard to have publicly acknowledged her shyness. And I felt pretty good about myself, you know. And then the emails started flooding in, and people had interpreted my cool clinical analysis as yet another attack on another poor shy person. So again, I felt stricken. I thought, oh my goodness, I've publicly attacked one of my own, and that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to make an intellectual comment on something. And
you know, we've come to a point, as we have with so many behaviours, of pathologising shyness. So now we have social anxiety disorder. The psychiatrists have got onto it and nailed it as a disorder. On the other hand, and I found her commentary in your book the most exciting, sociologist Susie Scott is quite angry that somehow we have come to pathologise and medicalise this experience, that somehow we've turned it into kind of some evil thing at odds with our purpose in the world. What did you think of her analysis?
Well, Susie Scott has called her book The Illusion of Competence, and she says that we're all pretending not to have these anxieties because we perceive that they are socially disapproved of. And I have to confess I felt really ambivalent about Susie Scott's argument, because on the one hand, I agree that our culture is becoming more and more kind of extrovert and narcissistic and obsessed with self-presentation, which is going to be hard for the shy people, harder and harder. On the other hand, for people who really are suffering very distressing social anxiety, it is a pathology. It is something which they could benefit from treatment, possibly even drugs. I have a bob each way on that. I think she makes some really, really important points, and I think we all have to maybe think very hard about why we're so desperate to hide this stuff, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, listen to me, I'm sitting here telling you all about it. I'm trying not to hide it anymore, partly in the hopes that other people will hear this and or read the book and go, yeah, why am I working so hard to pretend that I'm having a great time at this party when actually it's agony?
The point that she makes, in a way, isn't it, that we do hide this. I mean, but also evolutionary biologists would say an element of shyness is really vital. We should be a little hesitant about strangers that we don't know because they might harm us.
That's right. Yeah.
What about relationships? You do tell the story of a relationship with a man whose name is Tom. His real name is not Tom, a well-known Australian musician. You were with him for 10 years. And there's a great grief in this book at the end of that relationship. It coincided with you writing about this experience and really going inside to your own story. But what did that... relationships are interesting. They can become a crutch for that shyness and a sort of safe place, a solidarity, if you like, can't they?
A crutch is quite a negative way of putting it.
It is.
In some ways,
I'll admit that.
You could positively reframe that, to use one of my mother's psychological terms, and say, if you feel like you have the love of the person you love the most in the world, then that's the most positive evaluation you can get, and perhaps the best protection, maybe crutch protection, against your own fear of negative evaluation. And what happened to me was, in some hideous ironic coincidence, in the middle of writing a book about the fear of negative evaluation, in other words, the fear of rejection, I completely, out of the blue, endured the worst social rejection of my life. And, in some ways, of course, I did not want to write about that because it was so insanely painful. On the other hand, of course I had to write about it because I had to describe how I dealt with the worst possible example of exactly the thing I was trying to write about.
Did it bring a kind of clarity, really testing that rejection in this way?
Well, it forced me to think about my own role and perhaps my own culpability in ending up in that situation, the things that I realised I had imagined about this person, which turned out not to be true, and the reasons for that. So I guess in a sense it was cathartic. It's still painful. It will always be painful. You know, that sort of pain doesn't go away in a hurry.
What about shyness now? How do you feel about that part of yourself? Is shy Sian reconciled a little bit more with professional Sian?
Yes, definitely. And I actually think shy Sian's a little bit less shy.
Oh.
I mean, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to sit here and say I've cured myself. But I definitely feel less shame about it. And that's part of what makes it all worse, is that you're feeling these feelings and then you're feeling embarrassed and ashamed of these feelings. And now I'm like, oh, there goes your DNA again.
Well, it's a lovely book. You've had an article in the weekend newspapers about it. And has that had an impact already?
I feel very exposed. I feel a bit like I've just done a striptease for the nation, but I'm hoping it won't get any worse than that now.
Let's hope not. Look, lovely to have you on the show today.
Thanks.
And in the RN Lounge for the Sydney Writers' Festival. Have a great festival. Thank you, Sian Prior.
Thanks, Natasha.
And Sian Prior's new memoir is called Shy, and it's out through Text Publishing.